An American Olympian thanking God when she breaks a world record, her amazing run, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signing a law allowing chaplains to volunteer at public schools. You know there's going to be pushback. And of course, there are a lot of people who are happy about this change. We'll tell you all about it. Then Oklahoma mandating the Bible be taught in all public school classrooms from grades 5th through 12th. Superintendent Ryan Walters defending that requirement.
If you have teachers that say, listen, I'm just not going to teach any of the historical context of the Bible because I don't like the Bible, then we're not going to allow them to be teachers.
Welcome to One Nation Under God. I'm Adrienne Bankert. Let's get to the news first. Olympic athlete Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone breaking another world record in the 400-meter hurdles in the U.S. Olympic trials leading up to the Games in Paris. Now, when asked by a reporter about this world record, Sydney responded, "Praise God, I wasn't expecting that, but anything is possible in Christ." From celebration to education, starting July 1st in Florida, school districts will be able to allow volunteer chaplains to counsel students under a bill signed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who is defending the program as an option, saying it's completely voluntary for students and schools and that parental permission is required. Critics say the volunteer chaplains are not being vetted enough with high-level training. Supporters say it's a way to diversify the kind of resources and counseling given to students, and that chaplains have long been a mainstay in other government capacities, working alongside police and the military. Okay, the Bible once again in the headlines. Oklahoma making a sweeping change statewide. Ryan Walters, the state superintendent, now requiring the Holy Book to be in every public school classroom and that the Bible be incorporated as, quote, an instructional support in the curriculum for grades 5 through 12 from a historical document standpoint. And Superintendent Walters is no stranger to criticism, so he's welcoming discourse on this. He's joining me right now, too. Thank you so much for being here, Ryan.
Of course. Appreciate you having me on the show.
I want to have this conversation so that we can give people context. I think a lot of times there is so much disagreement over, what is separation of church and state and why in the world would religious texts be included in curriculum? First of all, how did you get around any type of First Amendment restrictions to allowing the Bible in the classroom?
Right. So, first of all, when you look at American history and you look at the way that American history has been taught into our schools, really, frankly, almost universally until the 1960s, the Bible was very prominent in a historical context, in a history class and a English class, because, frankly, it's the #1 best-selling book in American history. It's the most read book in American history. So, of course, it's going to be in curriculum. Of course, it's going to be referenced. Of course, when you're talking about Thomas Jefferson, Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, and some of the most prolific speeches and writings, there's a lot of examples that are provided by those individuals to the Bible. So what has happened since then? Well, we began looking at the way our classes were being taught around the state, the curriculum, and the Bible was noticeably absent. So we are putting the Bible back in the classroom so that our students get the historical context of why did the Pilgrims come to America? What were they fleeing? Why? The Mayflower Compact. Why are these references to the Almighty and God prevalent throughout American history? The historical context is important for our students, and we want to make sure that they have that kind of education.
And I know you just recently wrote an op-ed and talking a little bit about why this is perhaps the biggest book ban of all. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's unbelievable. When you look back at history, you look at 17th and 18th centuries, there's no more cited work in America, not even close, more than 3 times the second work is the Bible. So it was heavily cited, heavily used. But yet, why isn't it in classrooms? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the teachers' unions and radical leftists have said, no, we can't have the Bible. So you're going to have to explain historical events from another context. And again, that's a censoring of history. You are literally, I mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. Try explaining to a kid a letter from a Birmingham jail where Martin Luther King Jr. is arrested and he's going through the case of, look, I'm going to point to the Apostle Paul. I'm going to point to other biblical examples and say, listen, I believe, my faith convicts me to be called to a higher calling, not just, necessarily what some, local law might be. I'm supposed to go beyond that. Well, how do you explain that to a kid if you're not going to reference the biblical text that Martin Luther King Jr. himself cited? And so that was really where we began to do this deep dive and say, listen, it's got to be in all the classrooms. We have to make sure that it's being taught because our kids are missing a major point of American history, which is the historical context of the Bible.
What do you say to people who, point to when school-sponsored prayer was removed from schools? What do you say to people who say this is religious indoctrination?
Look, I completely reject that in its entirety. I mean, the reality is this is the history of the country. The left doesn't have to like it. They don't have to agree with it. They can be offended by it, but they can't go back and rewrite our history. We're not forcing religion on kids. We're not forcing one faith on kids. What we're doing is trying to be very accurate in the way that we're describing American history to young people. And frankly, you can read Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. They all have a tremendous amount of material where they wrote or talked about the importance of maximizing individual liberty that they believe came from God. And also they believe in having a moral people who were guided by their faith and by their religion. And so you look at that and go, well, they thought these two things were instrumental, and we're not going to tell our kids the history about one of them. We're doing a disservice to our kids, and frankly, a disservice to the country by not allowing our kids to understand the full context of American history.
A lot of my colleagues, they bring up this argument. They say, well, then you have to have the Quran in the classroom. You have to have Hindu texts in the classroom. Speak to that. Are those valid points of conversation, or is that to eclipse what you're saying?
Yeah, not really. I mean, listen, in courses where it's applicable, that's fine. When you look at a world history class and study, texts around the Middle East, of course, you're going to include some of those primary source documents as well. So this isn't to be exclusionary, but let's also be clear. The Bible played a historic role in American history, incredibly more influential than any other work in these certain time periods. So no, you don't go give equal time to things when that's not historically accurate. We have to place historical accuracy over feelings. So, history doesn't care about your feelings. The reality is those things happened. The people who were involved in those events, again, especially when we're talking about, the 17th and 18th century, they were prolific writers. You can read through this. And this is where you've got to go back to getting primary source material in front of young people too. Let them read it. Let them read why these people said they acted the way they did. And again, frankly, those documents speak for themselves.
So I think that for a lot of people, they get into debates and they just scream at each other when discussions of church and school and the Bible in a classroom. What are we, perhaps, who are projecting and broadcasting about this story missing?
I think what happens a lot of times with cases like this is what we've seen is, the left has done a tremendous effort to undermine history in our schools, talks of the Bible in our schools, any kind of mention of the faith of the founders in our schools. And for so long, we've allowed that to occur. And now that, you got folks and parents, we had parents all over the state going, look, what's the deal? I mean, why are our kids not getting a good of understanding of history as we did? And there's a lot of assessment data that show that too. U.S. history scores, civic scores are down at a record low as given last year. And so what I would say is, we've got to continue to base this argument around facts. Again, if it's historically accurate that individuals in history pointed to the Creator, pointed to God's impact according to their reading of the Bible in their life, we have to cover that. That is history. It is fact. We've got to get away from this emotional arguments that the left loves to use, and it's just reaction, it's emotion, and we've got to get back to, okay, listen, I've got primary source document after primary source document that are influential in American history, and that has to be included. So I think that's got to be the way we talk about these issues, and we've got to go back to facts to help drive this decision-making process.
Well, here, at NewsNation, the founder of this network, his intention was that we would focus on fact-based news, that we wouldn't go to extremes of far left or far right. And most of the people in this country, I'm curious to know if you believe this, they do believe in God. That's why I'm having these conversations. They believe in God. Most of them identify as Christian in their faith. But rather than us talk about the left says this or the right says this, what do you think it is in our culture overall? What's happened that we've vilified a book that does have historical significance in our society?
Well, look, you have seen those groups that have driven it out of school. So again, if you remove it in its entirety, so you have no reference of it, and you grow up and you become an adult, and then you see an initiative that says, listen, we want the Bible in school. Well, if all you've ever been taught is a history that doesn't include any reference to the Bible, the gut reaction from a lot of these individuals is, oh my gosh, well, why would you do this? You're injecting religion into it. And we're going, no, honestly, this is played a prominent role in our history. But if you didn't get that in a history class, if it was censored from you, that initial response is going to be probably an emotional response because you are viewing it as ahistorical. And that's why I think it's so important that we get this right now, because we have to be able to have open, honest conversations about facts, about the history of this country. And again, we're not saying somebody has to believe a certain faith or anything like that. What we're saying is we've got to have a understanding of our history, and then hey, you use that to guide you in your decision making how you see fit. But if we can't start there and have a factual based conversation, if we continue down this road, we're never going to be able to move the country forward.
What is your hope once the 24-25 school season starts? What is your hope for students having this particular text in classrooms?
Yeah, we have a robust agenda for our schools. We are really pushing math, reading, science. We are really doing a major initiative. And then this is a major part of it as well. So what I hope to see are kids that can come in, they can read a difficult text, they can do a deep dive, they can handle primary sources, and they can read about the Bible's impact in American history. They can see our leaders and how they describe themselves, and they can accurately assess for themselves the role that these texts played in the founding of our country and how critical they are. That's up for them to decide once they read them, but censoring them from them isn't going to allow that. So I am very excited about our Oklahoma students are going to have a better understanding of American history, more so than any other students in the country, because we're the first state to put the Bible back in school and really place American history in its appropriate and accurate context.
What's been the response from instructors, from teachers?
Look, I've got a lot of positive responses from teachers. We had our teachers union. They didn't like it, but honestly, they don't like anything like this. They haven't liked any kind of educational reforms. But general teachers here in Oklahoma, I've had a tremendous amount of them reach out to say, listen, thank you, because we know it's accurate, but we've been afraid that we were going to be targeted by left-wing attorneys or the teachers unions. Well, now you've made it crystal clear in its historical context, it should be here. So we've had a lot of teachers reach out and say, thank you. We obviously knew this needed to be included, but we kind of felt like we were out on a limb in doing it because of these attacks we've been under.
I want to read a portion of a letter that is attributed to you, if that's okay. USA Today reportedly sourced this, and you say in the letter, quote, adherence to this mandate regarding the Bible in classrooms is compulsory. It says further instructions for monitoring and reporting on this implementation for the 24-25 school year will be forthcoming. Immediate and strict compliance is expected. Did you feel that you needed to make this extremely, not forceful, I guess you could use the word forceful, but pretty darn straight and to the point? And what ways are you going to enforce that?
No, great question. I felt I had to be very, very direct because of the conversations I just described to you, where we have teachers that say, I know I should be using it, but I'm fearful because I've got these groups that are targeting me and coming after me. So it's crystal clear. This is a directive from the State Department. This isn't up to your ability to decide. No, this is part of the curriculum that has been passed through state law that we have absolute legal authority to do. And to be clear, you can't have teachers that say, listen, I don't like math, so I'm just not going to teach the fourth graders math. And to make it more historical, you can't have a teacher that comes in and goes, I don't agree with the civil rights movement, so I'm not going to teach it. Okay, well, I'm not going to allow that, right? You are going to teach our history to our kids. And so if you have teachers that say, listen, I'm just not going to teach any of the historical context of the Bible because I don't like the Bible, then we're not going to allow them to be teachers. Just like I wouldn't allow teachers who reject math or civil rights movement to refuse to teach those concepts. You have to teach Oklahoma academic standards. Our parents have the expectation of these standards that have been placed upon the classroom are actually going to be covered. So teachers have to agree to cover academic standards when they take their jobs.
What happened to you? I mean, in terms of getting you so impassioned, so fired up, you've received a ton of criticism. I've seen reports where students from your past jobs said, oh, he was totally different before he became superintendent. But what got into Ryan Walters to get him so fired up?
Well, let me take a step back. First of all, I appreciate the question because I was a history teacher. I was a history teacher for over a decade in the classroom. I regularly saw, as my career went on, more and more of this push to reject the exceptionalism of America, reject talking about the faith of the founders. I saw this in conferences I went to, trainings I went to, et cetera. But look, when my students say they didn't know my political views when I was a teacher, frankly, I take that as a compliment. I never went into my classroom to push a certain perspective on kids. I tried to go original source, primary source documents. Here you guys go. I want you to read it. We're going to do a deep dive. I'm going to push you academically. I have absolutely seen teachers unions and radical left-wing groups that have been able to control the school systems. They control it through the hiring processes. They control administrators, and they control it through the curriculum push into the coursework. And look, these things have led to worse academic outcomes for kids. I can point to every statistic. And now I'm showing you, now that in the state of Oklahoma, we have embraced free market reforms. We do merit pay for teachers. I went to find the best teachers in the country and recruit them with the largest signing bonus in country's history, $50,000 signing bonuses to come to Oklahoma. We have school choice, where parents can choose the school of choice for their kids. We have full transparency, so parents' rights are protected and they can see that. And now we're having an emphasis on curriculum in the classroom to make sure kids are being pushed academically in reading, writing, math, science, and now we're going to ensure that with history as well. So, I'm very excited. But listen, I came into office with a state that was ranked 49th in education. Status quo was not working. So we have put forth a very bold, aggressive agenda in education, and every state should be following us. I mean, we are seeing tremendous efforts here in the state of Oklahoma, and including our largest school district, which was one of our worst performing, Tulsa Public Schools. We removed the superintendent. She was concerned with she was pushing left-wing ideologies on kids instead of pushing outcomes. We had her replaced, and this new superintendent, tremendous. We're seeing already tremendous academic success there. So we're very excited about the direction of our schools.
You've brought up the left wing and the left so many times, I have to ask this. Obviously people have different points of view. They are from different political parties. And your perspective would be different being a history teacher versus being superintendent of an entire state. Eyes are different. Your eyes are opened in a different way. What do you think it is about some of the cultural curriculum or some of the things that were being, as you said, pushed? Do you believe that it was distracting students? Do you believe that there was some sort of agenda? I mean, maybe just speak to what you're saying a little bit with more clarity.
Sure. What I would say is you've got left-wing groups. So you got kind of these radical left-wing groups. You have the teachers union, you have the Democrat Party, and frankly, the federal Department of Education that have pushed agendas onto our kids. And we have seen this through the efforts of critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're now seeing it with the transgender curriculum. And what has happened in our classrooms is not only is the curriculum wrong, it is pushing indoctrination, not a study of the facts, but we've also seen this culture of leftism embraced by our schools where discipline policies are incredibly laxed. There is a culture of victimization rather than, listen, you're responsible for your own actions. So just like we have high academic standards, we also have high behavioral standards. We have seen a complete collapse of this in our education system. And look, I'm very clear to point out these were the policies of the Democrat Party, of the teachers union. Look, they got what they wanted, and they got it in our state. They had tremendous control in a red state over our education system. And so when I came into office, I look at these things and go, absolutely, this is not in line with Oklahoma values. This isn't what the voters of Oklahoma said that they wanted for their kids. And so we have drastically changed the trajectory of our state. And listen, we want every kid of every background to be successful. We want them to all come to school and learn the skills that make them where they can go get a job that they want. They can go down the path of a career that they want. And we also want them to be good citizens and good people. And so that's our emphasis here in Oklahoma. And since we have shifted away from those goals of the radical left in our schools, we've seen tremendous improvement. And that's where we're going to keep going along that direction.
What do you think the right needs to improve on? Because clearly, no party, no member of government is the solution. But what do you think that Republicans need to do differently when it comes to education?
Look, I think Republicans have to be more aggressive on the issue of education. What we've seen for far too long is Democrats get in office and they move education policy like crazy. They come in and they push an agenda. They come in and they push for less accountability, less transparency in schools. They want the government to have more control over an education system. And Republicans, it's so important that when we win an elective office, you come in and parents and taxpayers see the changes. You've got to come in and you got to shake things up. The teachers unions, they need to be out of our schools. They don't need to have the power in our schools that they have. Parents have to be in charge. You have to have school choice. You have to bring the Bible back in its historical context so that our kids understand our history. And you have to bring about the levels of accountability to what's going on in our education system so that taxpayer dollars are getting to the classroom. We're seeing progress from our kids in our schools. And again, that requires you running on an agenda and coming in and being very aggressive with it. I think President Trump has done a tremendous job to bring education back to the forefront. He's talked about abolishing the Department of Education. He's discussed, he rolled out the 1776 Commission, which I think is tremendous, laying out the case for, look, these are documents that have to be in American history classes. This is how you make sure the founders are being discussed in a history class. So I think President Trump has done a tremendous job of leading the Republican Party to say, listen, education is about parents, and it's about making sure kids are learning in the classroom what they should be learning. And I think that's exactly the direction the Republicans need to be going in.
Education's a big mountain. I know that you are self-described really as aggressive. What are you doing to fuel yourself? Because you know you're going to have more fights along the way to change this culture and change the system.
Look, I mean, the thing that excites me is to see the difference in the lives of families and kids. So for me, I've got 4 young children at home. So I come home to it every day wanting the best for my kids. And I get to talk to parents around the state every day, and I hear the same thing. They want the best education system for their kids. They know as a state, we have incredible folks with incredible conservative American values. And so we want to see an education system that reflects those. So that's where when I get up in the morning, I come in ready to go to work for Oklahomans. I come in ready to fight back against that radical left-wing ideology being pushed in our schools. And I'm ready to fight for our kids and our parents. And that's what gets me excited every day, is the tremendous potential of, if you can get education moving in the right track, it can transform all other aspects of society for the better. If you're grounded in truth, if you're grounded in academics, if you're grounded in the understanding that the parents know best for kids, it's really unlimited what you can achieve in our schools.
Ryan Walters, thank you so much. Judge Frank Caprio, who you see right here next to me, one of the most well-known judges of our time. And of course, we know you, Judge Caprio, from social media and your show Caught in Providence. Obviously, everybody was watching you. But what I've been so inspired by is that your life, you've documented a journey as you've faced pancreatic cancer. And so I think for a lot of people, they've watched you ask for prayer. And I wanted to talk to you about that. First of all, congratulations. Congratulations on being healthier today than you were yesterday.
Oh, thank you.
So tell me a little bit about why you decided to go online and ask people to pray for you.
I have a very strong religious background, both for my family and for my education. I think that there are several components to recovery from any kind of illness. And we all know there's medical and all of that, but I think loving care and the power of the Almighty are very important. And I believe in that. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe that there's a supernatural force that can guide us in our lives and give us hope and give us comfort. And I prayed every day before I was sick. And I'm praying twice a day now that I'm sick. And it gives me great solace and great comfort to rely on the Almighty. I actually think to fight cancer, like I have, takes 3 things. It takes physical strength, it takes medical strength, and it takes spiritual strength. Okay? The spiritual strength is something I have to handle myself. The medical strength, I've been very fortunate that I do have, in my judgment, wonderful doctors. And the physical strength is something that my parents gave me, that I've had from the time that I was younger. So I have all 3 components, and I'm giving it my best. Thank the Lord, I'm feeling much better, coping with this situation. My dad actually was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he died 8 months after his diagnosis. So most naturally, when I was diagnosed, I was very concerned. I have 5 children, I have a family, I have several obligations, and I relied upon my faith so much. And it was at that point that I decided that I would share my diagnosis with everyone. And that's when I made my notice public. One of the things that I like to share with you is that I received millions of prayers and from all over the world, of every denomination. And that gave me the strength to go forward and the fortitude. It just gave me peace of mind and gave me what I felt added to my physical strength to cope with this dreaded disease. Thus far, I've been fortunate. My prognosis, I'm satisfied with. It appears as though right now that I'm in, I'm not sure if the right word is remission, but my diagnosis right now is that perhaps I will survive this. I hope so.
Well, we're showing video of you at the hospital ringing the bell for your final treatment at the hospital and having those cheers of doctors and nurses. So much kindness. You are known for being, I think they call you the nice judge, the kind judge, from your work on the bench. But obviously you believe in that kindness coming back to you, and you've seen it, again, as you mentioned, from all over the world. What would you tell people about the power of prayer? Because I think, this conversation and us talking, for me, it was about saying, you know what? Prayer is normal for a lot of people all over the country and all over the world. And there's nothing taboo about it. But what has prayer done for you? How much has your faith grown, even in the midst of the hardest time possibly of your life?
When we reach our bottom, when we feel that we have nowhere else to turn, when we feel that the medicine is not enough, we find that kindness and understanding and prayer are there for us always. That the Almighty, regardless what religion you belong to, the Almighty is there to guide us and to help us in moments of despair. And it was in those moments that I turned to when I was diagnosed. So not only did I share that with my family and my friends, and obviously with my religion, but I thought that it'd be best that I shared that with the general public, so that, number one, they would know what I was going through. Number two, that maybe they would pray for me. Number three, maybe they would help give me the strength to persevere. And number four, maybe to give them some hope that if they have a crisis in life, that it's easy to give up. Anyone can quit. Anyone can say, I can't handle this any longer, I quit. And that's not in my makeup. It's not what I was taught from my parents. It's not in my psyche. So for all of those reasons and more, I decided to share my prognosis and my sickness. Prayer, I learned, helps overcome the loneliness of sickness. Because at the end of the day, there's a certain time of every day, for many people, it's when they go to bed at night after a long day. And when you're given a diagnosis that you have cancer, particularly of the pancreas, and when you go to bed at night, you just lie there and you think, what's in store for me? Like, how much time do I have left? Do I have 2 months? Do I have 6 months? Do I have 9 months? Do I have a year? Do I have longer than that? And what's in store for my family and my friends? And that's why I say it's a very lonely disease. That's the loneliness of it. And who do you turn to in situations like that? I turn to the power of prayer, and I turn to my family and close friends. Yeah. Family and close friends are always there, just as the power of prayer is always there.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, it's been a comfort for you. And I just think it's cool to see somebody who has so many people watching them from their career to share their story about how prayer is powerful. And I just thank you. Are you going to be documenting your healing? Because obviously you've been battling, but are you going to be documenting the success of these prayers on social media, just like you've been so many years?
Well, thus far we're successful. Hopefully success will continue.
Yes.
But the answer is yes, we will do that. I've been very fortunate that I have excellent medical care. Currently I'm being treated by the Miami Baptist Hospital Cancer Institute, and I was formerly treated by Dana-Farber Institute in Boston.
Well, I see your hair growing back. And I talked to your son, David, and he said, a hair for every prayer, a hair for every blessing.
I have a substantial growth in the last week. For some reason, my hair's been growing in the last week. I was totally bald last week. So
well, the Almighty knows how many
on.
hairs are coming out of your head. That's what I was taught. So.
Okay, Adrienne, I don't share my hair length with many people, but I'll share it with you.
Okay. All right.
That's it. And when it gets nice and long and curly, because I did have curly hair, maybe we'll do this again and I can shake my head.
Yes, I would love that. I would love that. Well, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being here on our episode of One Nation Under God, and continued healing to you and strength and peace as you enjoy the love of friends and family.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure for me to speak to you, Adrienne, and it's a pleasure for me to share my faith in the Almighty and talk about the strength that I derive from prayer. God bless you, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
God bless you. Thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.